Holy City Center Radio, this is episode 368, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Wednesday, May 7th, 2025. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. And wow, I put a disclaimer at the beginning of Friday's episode because I recorded it Thursday, and I said, I'm recording this earlier than normal because I'm going to the movies. More on that in a moment. So if anything big happens, that's why I'm not talking about it. I usually say that when there's a change in the schedule. In the off chance something happens, I didn't foresee anything happening, and wow, it might have sounded like I knew something was coming. I listened to the beginning because I wanted to remember what I said after this big incident on Sullivan's Island happened. And I was like, man, it sounds like I knew something big was coming the way I was talking. But I assure you, I did not see this coming. What a scary and just wild story that happened last week on Sullivan's Island. I'm sure you know a little bit about it, but I'll be discussing it here in this episode alongside some other news stories. So I'll be getting to that shortly. But wow, what a shocking day that was. Before we get into that, like I said, nothing, really big going on in my life. But I did go to, that sounds sad, nothing big going on in my life. But I did go to the movies with my friend to watch the new Marvel movie, Thunderbolts. And I really, really enjoyed it. I'm not the only one. A lot of my friends who went separately also said they really liked it. There's been kind of a lull with Marvel movies as far as, some of the series and movies that have come out haven't been the best. The reviews aren't the greatest. And a lot of people aren't as excited as they used to be when those movies were coming out. But I thought this was a pretty good return to form while also, evolving some characters and storylines and things. It was just a fun watch. You don't have to watch all the Marvel properties to enjoy this movie. So if you're like, oh, well, I didn't watch such and such where that character came from, they do a pretty good job of giving you the gist of each character's background, enough that you understand the story and, why they may be making certain decisions and whatnot. So even if you haven't really been up to date, I still think it's a pretty fun watch, and I definitely enjoyed it. So recommend you all check it out. Otherwise, like I said, I've been pretty quiet around here. Nothing really exciting to talk about. So let's get into the latest news. So, yes, obviously, we're going to start with the terror on Sullivan's Island that happened on Thursday. I recorded the episode. I was going about my business, getting ready to go to the movie. And all of a sudden I get this alert that there's a shelter in place going on Sullivan's Island due to some sort of armed suspect and, that they're looking for. So certainly scary to hear that. You don't hear a shelter in place order. Usually it's, when there's really bad weather going on here, but it's rare that in the Charleston area has something to do with a potential violent act. And so I didn't really know what was going on. Obviously made sure I posted about the shelter in place, and as the afternoon went on and then into the evening, more and more details came out, and it's just such a strange and unexpected story that took place. Very frightening. It could have been a lot worse, and thankfully, still upsetting, still bad what happened to some folks who are certainly going to be, I'm sure, traumatized, whether physically and mentally, over what occurred, especially these poor children. But I'm thankful that it wasn't worse. This could have been, we could be talking about deaths, plural, and thankfully no one did pass. Everyone who I'm going to talk about, they have been released from the hospital and, are on the road to recovery in different ways. So doesn't take away from the fact that it was probably a very, very scary day for those who lived on the island. A lot of questions, and this was over several hours that they couldn't locate the suspect. So let's get into the details. 2 children and 1 adult were injured on May 1st when a man drove his car at a pretty high rate of speed across the parking lot and into the playground at Sunrise Presbyterian Church on Sullivan's Island. So there was a preschool or there's some kind of school or I don't know what else to call it that these kids were in, varying ages, and they were outside on the playground, having recess. And this person who was later identified as Justin Colin Adams, a 36-year-old from the Greenville area, drove his car intentionally, according to police, as well as a statement from the church, that this was a very much an intentional act, not an accident, although the motives behind it, we do not know. So Adams has, thankfully, after he was located, has been charged with 3 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of assault and battery in the first degree. This is according to the Charleston County Sheriff's Office. After hitting those 3 people, he fled the scene on foot and was apprehended approximately 3 hours after the incident in a boat that was docked behind a home in the 3200 block of Jasper Boulevard. So we ended up getting some more details. So police on Sullivan's Island said they were dispatched to a call at 12:46 p.m. in the 2700 block of Ion Avenue concerning a person who was armed with a knife. So he had a knife on him after he got out of the car. He brought that knife with him. So they get the call. A few moments later, a call came in to the Charleston County Consolidated Dispatch Center. That's like 911 calls get routed to them, that indicated that the suspect had left the scene in a black sedan. A second emergency call reported that a black sedan had struck several victims at the church, which is located at 3222 Middle Street. So multiple calls came in, some people just seeing a guy with a knife, others who had witnessed the incident at the church. So according to the Sheriff's Department, Adams drove the 2018 black Chevrolet Malibu across the parking lot and into the playground area, where he struck a 12-year-old boy who was transported to a local hospital. Thankfully, they were released the same day. The vehicle, still traveling at a high rate of speed after hitting that first child, appeared to chase the children as they ran, according to the department's description in the police report that they put out. The car then struck a teacher who was thrown over the hood and roof of the vehicle. That person was brought to the hospital and also has been discharged. Adams apparently continued on this insane rampage on a sidewalk where children were running for cover, and struck a 10-year-old boy who ended up being pinned underneath the Malibu. Once the car's airbags deployed, that was after this part of the accident, Adams ended up leaving the vehicle with a knife and took off. We found out later the vehicle was his mother's. He was in the car with her and threatened her with a knife if she didn't let him drive or take the car. She got out of the car and he hopped in and just took it. So he started this whole thing by threatening his mother. There's been some reports that maybe he has recently gone through some mental health issues or had been treated for something, but the details are still being worked out as far as that. So, of course, this is what triggered the shelter in place, where everyone on Sullivan's Island was supposed to, remain wherever they were, whether it was at home or if they were at work or out to eat. They were not supposed to be out in public because they didn't know where this gentleman was, and obviously he is dangerous. So local law enforcement, according to the Sullivan's Island Police Department, they responded immediately. That also included the Isle of Palms Police Department, along with fire and rescue personnel from both of those islands. However, as the day went on, they brought in some other folks, including the Sheriff's Department, the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, the National Park Service even, and many, many more entities were all involved in this, because also there was concern that he might be in the water hiding, and so, people from like the Navy, I forget the specific department within that's here in Charleston, but they were part of it as well. So this was taken very seriously and very quickly. Thankfully, around 5:53 p.m. So actually, I said 3 hours before, but it's closer to 5 hours actually. So I apologize for that. That this started, around 12ish and then ends almost at 6 o'clock. So 5.5 hours, nearly 6 hours that the island was in a shelter in place, and they located him. He was spotted by a helicopter from the Sheriff's Department. Actually, he was, hiding in a boat that was just off of a dock on Sullivan's Island. So that's the background. That's what we know. Again, there's been some reports out there, about this person. Really, all I've seen, besides the details I mentioned of the accident itself, is this supposed mental health situation, which more will come out about that, I'm sure. No motive has been given yet. It doesn't appear that he knew anybody at that church. He didn't have an ex at work there or a child that was there. It appears to be random, but again, we'll see if he ends up talking at all, or what his lawyers end up saying. It's going to be a little while before we get more details of this very bizarre and scary incident that happened. It was several hours of a lot of us just wondering what the heck is going on. And I feel bad for everyone on Sullivan's who, had the shelter in place because they were in the thick of it. They really had no idea. And supposedly there's an armed person in their community. And obviously, most of my thoughts are with the three people that were hit and anybody who was at that playground, especially the children who had to run for their lives. They must have been so scared, and it must have been so shocking to see, three people, including two of their classmates or, whatever, they officially are at this church, get hit by a car and one child get trapped underneath for a little bit. I mean, just really frightening. And I can't imagine what they're going through. And it's awful situation. The story is just crazy. And so you kind of get wrapped up in those, like, this is wild. Some guy did this. And then several hours are looking for him and he's hiding in a boat. But the real point is the three people who are injured and anyone who's affected by it. I mean, the parents of those children must have been so scared. And I can't imagine what they're going through now. Now, again, whatever the injuries are, and I've heard, whispers of what they were, one of the three may have had like a broken leg, but that hasn't been confirmed by anybody, official. But, that's a serious injury, of course, a broken bone, if that is indeed what happened. But regardless, whatever the injuries are, there's going to be a recovery period. But the mental side of things is also, something I worry about for these folks. It's such a traumatizing event that they just went through. And, when you really start thinking about that side of the story, it makes it even sadder and even scarier, but also thankful that it wasn't worse. Lives could have easily been lost in this situation. We've seen other situations. I think New Orleans was the most recent, as well as one in another country. I forget where people have driven cars into crowds and people have died, and many have been seriously injured. So considering we've seen things like that, the fact that only three people were injured and no one died is a miracle. Obviously it's weird to say when an incident happens, but if this incident was going to happen, this is one of the better scenarios as far as we didn't lose anybody, but certainly still scary. Certainly my thoughts are still with those folks in that community, and I will absolutely provide updates as we have them. Switching gears to local politics, Matt Leber, he is a freshman South Carolina Republican in Charleston County. He's got an interesting background, which I've talked about previously. You should look into it. He also has a wife on the Charleston County School Board. They're Moms for Liberty back candidates, MAGA Republicans. So you get the drift, you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. But he's been in the news for a couple things. He and his wife very much behind like the book banning thing. But he also was behind that campaign you may remember me talking about, where he wanted librarians to give an oath of office that related to the U.S. Constitution. Currently, they took an oath, but it wasn't specific to the U.S. Constitution, and that just drove him nuts for whatever reason. And so the Charleston City Paper just put together an editorial about this whole fight that he had, and it's pretty scathing and just how ridiculous and what a waste of time this whole thing was. So it all started when his former campaign manager, Graham Horseman, who is an attorney and gun rights activist, started making a public stink about the fact that the volunteer board members didn't take the oath of office contained in the state constitution. Now, no volunteer library board in the state takes the constitutional oath, just an FYI. But Leber demanded that the Charleston County Council fire 9 of the board's 11 volunteer members because they were saying, we're not going to do that. We're not required to do that. This is silly. In the grand scheme of things, I don't think any of them would have a problem if it was required. They would do it. But they saw this for what it was, which is just some dumb culture war, red meat for like the MAGA base. Oh, these librarians, we've told you all they want to do is give your children, disgusting books that are graphic and full of nudity and sex, and they're trying to groom them. And look at this. Now they won't take the oath of office to the state constitution or the U.S. Constitution. These people, it's that whole thing. And again, props to them for being like, we know what this is. We're not doing it just because this is what you want. So at that point, the county council in Charleston began, debating, okay, what's the right way to do this? They talked about it over several meetings, whether they should make them take this oath to the state constitution, U.S. Constitution, or what, or just keep the oath of office that they have now. And in the end, they ended up saying, this is silly. We're not doing this. Let's just keep things how they are. But that wasn't good enough for Leber. So he put together a budget amendment that threatened to cut off state funding for any county library system whose board members didn't take the oath. No surprise, the Republican supermajority in the state Senate went ahead and passed this. Again, a waste of time, but whatever. And despite them doing that, they had to replace his amendment because, as the Post and Courier put, it was like hastily written, and basically some adults in the room had to make sure it was worded better and was appropriate and all that stuff. But the same result happened in the end, which is now that county librarians have to swear an oath to the Constitution. Now, as the article says, it doesn't hurt anybody, and again, I have no problem with this. It's now required. Cool, they do it. What the issue is there was no need for this at all. It was a dumb culture war thing that was a waste of time and probably money if you break down, what could have been discussed beforehand. And also, this doesn't do anything to help people who are struggling under this economy. It's not helping. It didn't create a single job, didn't make a neighborhood safer, didn't improve one public school classroom. It didn't do anything. And, these are all things that the city paper pointed out. It was just a dumb culture war thing. And hooray, Leber, you won. You got this thing passed, which, again, not a big deal, but it became a big deal. And there was absolutely no reason for this to even be discussed, or at least not in the manner that it was. This is something he could have brought up in the normal course of action. Hey, did you know that librarians don't have to swear an oath to the Constitution? I think they should. I want to propose this. And could have went through the normal channels, and it wouldn't have been this this culture war thing where he's calling out librarians, wants them fired, volunteers fired because they won't take this oath. Just unnecessary. And again, just a waste of time. South Carolina's General Assembly has done some other things. They also passed a bill for lottery-funded private school vouchers. That happened last week. The bill provides publicly funded vouchers for private school education. And while the lawmakers in favor of the bill says this will be a positive impact on kids and parents because it gives them school choice, the South Carolina Education Association says this is all unconstitutional. In fact, a similar bill was deemed unconstitutional just last year because it used money from the Taxpayer General Fund to pay for private school vouchers. So, as you heard at the top, this is a new bill, and it changed the funding source. So the people who support this bill are hoping that will make it constitutional because they're using funds from the South Carolina Education Lottery instead of the Taxpayer General Fund. So right now, the state's education lottery actually does do some things for school funding. They fund buses, resources, and technology for K through 12 schools. They help fund public access television, as well as scholarships and grants for higher education. But now we'll be adding, if this ends up being deemed constitutional, those funds will now be used for parents who want to send their kids to a private school. So in South Carolina, as well as many other states, public school funding is largely based on the number of students in attendance. So that means if more students decide to go to private schools, individual school funding may go down. So it makes sense. The less students you have, the less funding you'll get because you're not having to, teach as many students. And, it makes sense in some ways, but also it could end up harming a school, especially schools that are already underfunded, because it's, there's plenty of schools in the state that are struggling with the current funding that they have. So now a lot of those schools will probably see students leave because they'll have this private voucher and go to a private school, thus making the public schools even worse. It's a tough situation. Don't get me wrong. If I had a kid in a really bad school and this was my only chance to get out, yeah, you want to help those children out. But it's only, on the other hand, it's just going to harm those schools and the kids who stay there for whatever reason are not eligible for the voucher, or because there is a cap on it, or whatever it may be. We should be making the public schools better instead of using state funds to send kids to private schools, thus making the public schools even worse in certain areas. That's my thought on that. So the bill says the voucher program is limited to 10,000 scholarship students, and then the next year there'll be an increase to 15,000. So that's what we're looking at. There is a cap. That's how many students could be receiving funds out of this education lottery fund. And it's likely to at least be put into law because the bill is currently heading over to Governor McMaster's desk. He's expected to sign off on it. It's something he's been trying to push for a while. But will it be questioned in court? It seems that that's a very good possibility. South Carolina Education Association, them or some other organization may try to bring this to court to say it's still unconstitutional. So if that happens, I will certainly let you know. And our last story today involves Volvo Cars. Unfortunately, they did confirm that they are laying off a portion of their employees at its Charleston plant. It's in Ridgeville. They still call it the Charleston plant for whatever reason, but it's in Ridgeville. The plant currently employs about 2,500 workers. Volvo says about 5%, or around 125 employees, will be affected by these layoffs. The company said they're working to help employees that are impacted by the layoffs, and they want to protect as many jobs as possible while also balancing company investments. Unclear if this was something that was in the works already or if it's related to any changes in the economy, whether before or after Trump was in office, or if it's related to the tariffs that might be coming, because we don't really know. One day they're on, one day they're off. But the tariffs that may be coming to the automobile industry. But regardless, always sad to see a local business either close or have to lay off folks, and hopefully these 100+ folks that are out of jobs will be able to find something soon. And that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem for producing this and every episode. And also Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. I'll be back with you later this week. I'll get you caught up on any updates to these stories or talk about some new things. We'll see what happens. I'm already looking forward to it. But until then, good night. Good luck.